Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a big flavored Imperial Stout from Weldworks Brewing Company. The specific beer is called American Solera. It clocks in at 10.8% ABV and it's been brewed with milk chocolate, chocolate fudge, and coffee. Weldworks Brewing Company is based in Greeley, Colorado. So starting with label art, on the front it's just got their clean kind of design. It's got some kind of gold accent kind of foil, but as you rotate around, they've got kind of a foil hand doing the surfer hang loose kind of thing. So it looks pretty cool. I like it. Nice clean design with some subtle accents. So let's get this cracked gently. I'm gonna get this poured right in the old stout glass here. Oh, very dark, very thick. I'm gonna agitate this one early. Give it a chance to form a head. This is very, very, very thick. Thick, dense beer. We're going to back it off now and let the carbonation kind of rise and do its thing. While that is settling, ooh, big aroma on this one too. Okay, yeah, as expected, Imperial Stout, it is absolutely pitch black. Absolutely pitch black. I can just see on the side of the glass super tiny, fine champagne-like bubbles kind of clinging and slowly working their way up through this thick beer. And I can see that head did settle and it's quite creamy. So obviously attributable to this finer rush of carbonation bubbles up to the top that typically helps the cause. But it looks great. Let's get right up over it for a proper sniff. Oh yeah. It smells like a big beer. There's a slight booziness to it on the nose and you can really smell the pungency of the chocolate and the coffee. So milk chocolate plus chocolate fudge, that's getting muddled. I can't say, oh, that smells like milk chocolate. Oh, there's the fudge. It just smells chocolatey. And then that underlying coffee as well, and the roasty edge from the malt bill. So very, very big nose. It looks the part, made a really nice head to be poured at home out of a bottle into the glass. So we're gonna jump right in and see what this one's about. Ooh, that's a big beer. Big beer indeed. Intensity of flavor. So, no lactose in this one, but surprisingly, the chocolate and the fudge really do come through quite clearly and taste of both milk chocolate and much darker, richer chocolate fudge. Coffee comes through very clearly as well. The chocolate does hit you first, and then the coffee's behind. And as the coffee opens up, within about a second behind that, the underpinnings of that roasty malt bill start to rise as well. And that's where the coffee is really binding. It's binding to that malt bill, that roasty undertones to it. No suggestion of smokiness at all. Just really deep, deep, deep roasting to the malt bill. And a very nice, clearly a darker roast coffee bean that they used with this beer. It smells absolutely fantastic. It tastes absolutely fantastic. In terms of texture, body, this is a heavier beer. It's nearly 11% ABV. It's a full-bodied beer. This is a heavy body. The mouthfeel, tons of resistance. It's very thick. I could see it as I was pouring it. That does translate into the glass. It's very, very thick, very resistant when you move it across the palate. Slight bit of agitation and it gets really creamy, very silky smooth and thick. So this is a big beer with big aromas, big flavors, and big body and big textural sensory inputs. So yeah, it's just a classic big flavored Imperial Stout. So we're gonna jump back in for a second sip, let the flavors re-intensify, see if I pick anything else out, then we're gonna talk about this finish. Chocolate hits you so big up front. There's a slight suggestion of sweetness. It doesn't taste sweet at all, but there's this suggestion of sweetness that often comes in from higher ABV beers where there's that little bit of booziness that can often translate into the suggestion of sweetness without the beer having added lactose. That's what's happening here, what I'm experiencing. And it really does make that milk chocolate truly taste like sweeter milk chocolate chocolate fudge, this richer, deeper. You can independently taste both of them. Then that coffee comes in, that malt bill comes in, and it's all just swirling around together. Just layers of flavor kind of ribboning in and out of one another. Very, very nice beer. Still as impressive of a body and mouthfeel on second sip as well. So in terms of the finish, it's not quite as long as you might expect for a beer in this ABV range with that intensity of flavor, that pungency of flavor, but it's definitely longer than average, to be certain, but it's not ridiculously long. What you get left with on the back really dissipates around the 30-40 second mark, which is still not a short amount of time, but compared to, say, a barrel-aged variant, it's nothing quite in that realm. This is not dry at all to the end. It's very wet, it's very round, it's very full. It's a big, big beer, and it feels like it all the way to the end. The last vestiges of flavor that linger on the palate before it's all gone is a distinct fudge flavor. That's where it finishes. Finishes with fudge and just a little suggestion of that coffee left over as well. The milk chocolate gets out of the way, the roasty edge of the malt bill gets out of the way, but a very nice, very delicious beer. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. Before we do that, I'm going to make an amendment here. I said that this was Weldworks Brewing Company's American Solera. This is actually a collaborative brew between Weldworks Brewing and American Solera. So on the side, Making Good Time, that's the name of the beer. I totally didn't catch that because I was looking at this from the front of the label. So this was a collaboration between Weldworks and American Solera. The beer is called Making Good Time. An Imperial Stout clocking in at 10.8% ABV, brewed with milk chocolate, chocolate fudge, and coffee. And Weldworks is, of course, based in Greeley, Colorado. American Solera is based in Oklahoma. So starting with the aroma. This was one of those classic, just super big, bold, pungent aromas off of an Imperial Stout with additives. You could smell the milk chocolate, you could smell the fudge, all of that chocolatey goodness, the underlying roasty malt bill, and the coffee all came through perfectly clearly, very pronounced, smelled amazing. Aroma gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste. Taste on this one was really nice, and while there was a little bit of a boozy aroma, there was a little bit bigger of a booziness to the bite in the flavor profile. And it didn't really taste boozy so much as it presented a suggestion of sweetness, and the way that the flavors kind of staggered and entered the mix, it really played to the strengths of those additives. So that slight suggestion of sweetness played first into the chocolate, milk chocolate, then the chocolate fudge, a lot richer, deeper, true chocolate. Then the coffee came through, then the underlying roastiness from the malt bill. But just as in the aroma, all of the additive ingredients had their own voice in the flavor profile, and when they all mixed together, it was absolutely delicious. Taste gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body, this was a heavy beer. I had a suspicion when I was pouring it because it looked quite thick. It was just pouring out of the bottle. I was definitely right about that. A very big, heavy body indeed. Tons of presence. The body gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, extremely resistant. Again, whenever you're pouring in a beer and it looks thick as it's glugging out of the bottle, that's normally going to be the case. Either the body or the mouthfeel or both are going to have some significance to them. In this case, it was both. Very, very resistant mouthfeel. When you agitate it around the palate, it got even thicker and more resistant. Absolutely impressive for a nearly 11% Imperial Stout. Mouthfeel gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, definitely longer than average, but despite the intensity and pungency of the additive ingredients, the finish wasn't as long as I expected. Like I said, still longer than your average beer to be certain, longer than your average Imperial Stout, had a lot of big bold flavors, but I expected due to the intensity they would stick around a lot longer on the palate than they did. As it were, still above average, finish gets a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one formed a beautifully lush, creamy head, stuck around nearly the entire time. Head and retention gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was one of those textbook Imperial Stouts, absolutely pitch black, gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance, I really liked the balance on this beer, and while I will come back and say again that all of the ingredients, both in terms of aroma and the flavor profile, did have their own voice, came through clearly. I did find myself wanting for a little more of that underlying roastiness and earthiness from the malt bill, and even a little more of the coffee as well. Chocolate on top of chocolate fudge is kind of chocolate overload, and it was very nice and very delicious. Would have just balanced a little differently, maybe dial back the portions of that, maybe add a little bit more of the coffee, a little additional malt to let the underlying richness and roastiness come through just as clearly as the chocolate did. But I'm really being nitpicky here. The balance was still certainly above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I really like the beer. Just a minor balance tweak for me personally would have made it perfect. I just dock 1 point here though. Feeling in the intangible gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, as an example of this style. Overall, this beer did very well. Lost just a handful of points in a few categories. For me, really the thing that kept it from getting top marks really was just the slight tweak I would have made to the balance. Balance is really key for me in a beer, and I can enjoy a beer even if it's not balanced exactly as I want. But for me, that's part of what separates a truly, truly top tier stellar beer, from other beers like it. And there's a lot of good beers like this out there, and this one was very well done. I would have just made some minor tweaks in the balance department to kind of set it apart, and maybe a little less chocolate forward to balance that chocolate with the roasty undertones. But overall, well above average. Example of the style does get a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on this collaborative brew between Weldworks Brewing Company and American Solera, Making Good Time, the name of the beer, to a 92 out of 100. So it may sound like I was really kind of criticizing. I'm not. Just minor tweaks. I'm just mentioning it because that's what I experienced. Everybody's different. Everybody's palate is different. Everybody's personal likes are different. But for me, that's what I experienced, so I figured I would share it with you. But 92, that's a very high score. This was absolutely delicious beer. I would recommend this to anybody that's a fan of Imperial Stouts or flavored stouts or really chocolate-forward beers. This is definitely one for you. Absolutely fantastic. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on the notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.